This geometry is etched into the global subconscious of every modern person. 5 perfect angles, a gigantic gray monolith sprawling along the banks of the Potomac River. We have grown accustomed to perceiving this building as the absolute center of global military power.
It seems indestructible, just like the very concept of American dominance on the planet.
But this flawless form is merely a grandiose optical illusion. Its perfect proportions conceal a fatal architectural flaw that has grown to the scale of an infrastructural monster. What looks like an impregnable fortress today was, for decades, the country's most vulnerable military facility. This space was never designed to defend against external threats in the first place. It crumbled from within, literally suffocating under its own monstrous weight.
Pipes rotted within its walls for decades, and the foundation cracked from pressure fluctuations.
Toxic asbestos poisoned the ventilation system, while tons of archival paper threatened to collapse the fragile ceilings. The underground levels were regularly flooded, cutting off vital utilities. The Pentagon is not just the largest office building in the world. It is a cumbersome, heavy organism that ceaselessly devours resources and technology. It is a gigantic apparatus for the production of violence, held hostage by its own concrete shell.
It has become a victim of a form chosen in incredible haste on the eve of a global catastrophe.
By the end of this story, you will understand the true physical cost of absolute security. You will see how a utilitarian administrative box mutated into a paranoid, autonomous bunker. It will become clear why each new layer of protection only intensified the internal tension of the entire system. We will take this mechanism apart to expose its real, hidden framework. But to do this, we must go down to the very foundation and expose the roots. Return to that moment when no global military hegemony yet existed. To the time when American generals huddled in temporary leaky barracks. To the place where, in the spot that would become the future center of world power, there were only dumps and a rotting swamp. Europe was already ablaze with war, but America was trying with all its might to stay out of it. The U.S. War Department was a chaotic jumble of dozens of scattered offices. These departments were scattered throughout Washington, D.C., like shards of a broken mirror. It took the command hours just to relay secret orders by courier through traffic jams. The bureaucratic machine ground to a halt at every turn, physically incapable of an instant response. The growing threat of entering World War II made this sluggishness deadly. The Army urgently needed a single command center capable of coordinating millions of soldiers. A single massive roof was needed for the entire unwieldy war machine. However, there was simply no room for such a construction behemoth in the crowded capital.
President Franklin Roosevelt categorically forbade spoiling Washington's historic landscape with industrial buildings.
The military had to move across the river to the swampland of Virginia, a place no one wanted. They were given a plot of irregular shape, squeezed between dusty roads and old warehouses. It was precisely this haphazard geometry of the transportation junctions that dictated the shape of the future building. No mystical or profound strategic meaning was originally intended in the 5 corners. It was a harsh, forced compromise with the curved boundaries of the allocated wasteland. Thus began the story of the most paradoxical and difficult structure of the 20th century. The summer of 1941 in Washington was stiflingly hot and extremely tense. General Brand Somerville received orders to immediately resolve the problem of fragmentation within the military command. He set an insane deadline. A rough draft had to be on the table in 4 days. The architects worked themselves to the bone, literally falling asleep at their drafting tables from exhaustion. The site chosen for construction was a dreary and repulsive site. It was a low-lying area, thoroughly saturated with water, where brick factories and junkyards for old cars were located. The mud here was so thick and sticky that heavy trucks got stuck in it. It was on this unstable, unreliable foundation that the heaviest building of the era was to be erected. Chief architect George Bergstrom immediately faced strict restrictions on the use of materials. Steel was needed for the construction of warships and tanks, and every kilogram was carefully rationed. The building could not be built upward so as not to block the view of Arlington National Cemetery. The only practical solution was to expand outward, spreading the concrete mass across the ground.
Thus was born the idea of concentric rings, tightly nested within one another.
5 solid facades, 5 stories above ground, and a huge courtyard in the middle. This radial structure allowed for maximum space efficiency and reduced courier travel time. It took exactly 7 minutes to walk from any point in the building to the farthest point. But this ingenious logistical scheme came at a hidden physical cost. The decision to forego a sturdy steel frame meant that the entire incredible load would rest solely on the concrete. The building was to be monolithic, cast on site as a single giant sculpture. This required colossal amounts of raw materials, which had to be sourced as quickly as possible. The solution was found right under their feet, in the muddy bed of the Potomac River. Dozens of dredgers worked around the clock to pump hundreds of thousands of tons of wet sand and gravel from the riverbed. This river material was mixed with cement, forming the body of the future impregnable fortress. In essence, the Pentagon was built from the very river on whose banks it stood.
In early autumn 1941, workers poured the first concrete into the damp foundation.
In a grim twist of fate, this very date would prove fateful for the complex exactly 60 years later. Construction began without a final approved design. The blueprints were refined on the fly. Speed became the main idol, to which quality and safety were ruthlessly sacrificed. In just 16 months, a massive concrete leviathan rose from the swamps. It was an absolute record in industrial construction, bordering on an impossible miracle. But an architectural miracle always has an expiration date, and it began to run out immediately. The structure had been built too quickly to be truly sturdy and durable. The harsh wartime economy laid the foundation for critical infrastructure vulnerabilities within the complex. Instead of elevators, which required scarce steel for cables and motors, gentle concrete ramps were built. They consumed a huge amount of usable space, but allowed cargo to be moved without electricity. From the inside, the building resembled not a classic headquarters, but a multi-level warehouse terminal. There was not a single full-fledged steel load-bearing beam in the thick walls. The enormous weight of the 5 floors rested solely on the density of the concrete columns. To somehow compensate for the lack of rebar, the engineers had to make these columns unnaturally massive. The interior space became heavy, visually oppressive, and devoid of the slightest elegance. The basic utility systems were laid out in the open, running directly along the walls and low ceilings.
There simply wasn't enough time to create concealed utility shafts or mechanical floors.
Wires, pipes, and ventilation ducts entangled the corridors like the exposed nervous system of a giant. Any accidental damage to the main lines threatened to instantly paralyze an entire section of the building. Cheap utilitarian limestone from Indiana was used to clad the exterior facades. It gave the building an austere government office look, but quickly began to absorb the city's dirty soot. The architectural simplicity quickly turned into the harsh gloom of a factory churning out orders. There was absolutely no room here for ostentatious luxury, comfort, or aesthetics. Sanitary standards also fell victim to racial segregation and rushed design. Under Virginia law at the time, white and black employees were required to use separate restrooms. As a result, the number of restrooms at the Pentagon exceeded the standard by exactly twofold. This doubled the daily load on the fragile water and sewage system. The 5-acre courtyard became the focal point of this vast labyrinth. It was informally dubbed the epicenter, without realizing how ominous that would sound in the future. Diagonal corridors intersected here, allowing for a quick shortcut between the distant concrete rings. It was a zone for a brief respite in the midst of the unending, exhausting conveyor belt of war. The illusion of indestructible strength was sustained solely by the complex's colossal dimensions.
The total area of the working floors exceeded 600,000 square meters of concrete.
The length of the corridors amounted to nearly 30 kilometers of monotonous, mind-numbing space. It was easy to get lost in these identical corridors, even with a detailed map in hand. The building successfully fulfilled its primary function. It united the command under one gigantic roof. From this labyrinth, the generals directed the massive Normandy landings and the carpet bombing of Tokyo. The structure was perfectly suited to the moment, allowing the machinery to operate at maximum efficiency. However, victory brought a new problem. The bloated bureaucracy had no intention of shrinking. It was originally assumed that following victory, the building would be peacefully converted for civilian use. The architects planned to house either the National Archives or a massive government hospital for veterans there. No one seriously believed that a peacetime military would retain such monstrous proportions. The Pentagon was designed and built as a temporary, one-time response to an acute crisis. But the end of World War II did not bring the expected demobilization of the global bureaucracy. The swift victory transformed the United States into a superpower with new, global ambitions. The military quickly realized that this concrete island was ideal for controlling half the world. The temporary headquarters quietly but firmly acquired the status of a permanent citadel. A long era began in which the main weapon was not steel, but endless paper. Millions of secret documents, directives, reports, and plans were generated daily without pause. The paper possessed a colossal, initially almost imperceptible physical weight. Heavy metal filing cabinets filled the hallways, slowly but surely increasing the load on the floors. Concrete floors designed for standard office loads began to experience chronic critical overloading. In some sectors, the massive paper archives exceeded the permissible limits of structural strength. The first micro cracks appeared, invisible to the eye but deadly to the internal structure. The building was literally crushing itself under the weight of accumulated knowledge and bureaucratic secrets. Along with the paper, the army of clerical workers and analysts grew uncontrollably. At the height of the Cold War, more than 30,000 people were here at the same time. It was a fully fledged, autonomous city with its own cafeterias, shops, and bus stations. The mass of people created constant physical vibration and wear and tear on materials. The infrastructure, designed for Spartan temporary conditions, began to malfunction seriously. The old sewage system became clogged, unable to withstand intensive round-the-clock operation. Internal communication lines overheated from the heavy flow of encrypted messages and calls. The system was forced to operate at full capacity without the slightest chance to stop. The Pentagon became a hostage to its own unique but closed architecture. It was impossible to expand outward due to the site's rigid boundaries and ring roads. It could not be built upward due to the weak riverbed foundation and height restrictions. Growth could only occur inward, compressing the structure to a state of critical mass. Thus, step by step, a global illusion of an indestructible monolith took shape. The system learned to masterfully conceal its vulnerabilities behind a dense, impenetrable veil of secrecy. No one outside these walls knew how often transformers blew out or old pipes leaked. The fortress stood solely on the word of its original builders and the constant patching of holes. The dawn of the nuclear age completely and permanently changed the harsh rules of survival. The emergence of Soviet ballistic missiles rendered any ground-based architectural fortifications meaningless. The Pentagon, built to protect against conventional bombs, turned out to be an ideal, high-contrast target. Its geometric center was the easiest point to aim weapons of mass destruction at. In response to this absolute threat, the Pentagon began frantically burrowing deep into the ground. Beneath the building, large-scale construction began on classified, multi-level command bunkers. Digging into the complex, damp soil, engineers created new blind security levels. The command center for the National Armed Forces retreated forever into a concrete underground. The technological revolution of the 1960s dealt a new, devastating blow to the historic building. Mechanical typewriters were replaced by the first mainframes and electronic communication systems. Their operation required hundreds of kilometers of thick, heavy copper cables. These cables had to be laid somewhere without disrupting the work of the massive agency. Holes for digital communications began to be haphazardly punched through the old floors. Ceiling niches became so clogged with wires that they were completely impassable. No one drew up any unified installation plans. New lines were simply thrown over the old ones. It resembled the uncontrolled growth of a massive tumor inside a living organism. The new electronics generated a massive amount of heat, turning the enclosed server rooms into scorching saunas. The urgent installation of the most powerful air conditioning and industrial cooling systems was required. The heavy units were placed directly on the flat roof, adding thousands of tons of unaccounted-for load. Vibrations from their massive motors were transmitted down the load-bearing columns deep into the building. The old wiring could not handle the new amperage at all and began to melt. Small fires in the shafts and behind the suspended ceilings became a frightening everyday occurrence. The building was in a state of constant smoldering fire, which was quickly and quietly extinguished. The complex's energy hunger grew exponentially with every new computer. During the Vietnam War, internal tensions reached their absolute peak. Thousands of protesters swarmed around the building, encircling the facade in a tight ring. External pressure from the streets coincided with the maximum internal wear and tear of all engineering systems. The Pentagon turned into a besieged fortress that was rapidly crumbling from within. The end of the Cold War brought no relief, but only laid bare a frightening reality. Extensive inspections revealed that the complex did not meet any modern building codes. In the event of a major earthquake, the concrete columns could simply collapse like a house of cards. The building had reached the point beyond which uncontrolled physical destruction would begin. By the early 1990s, it had become impossible to hide the facility's catastrophic physical condition. Rusty pipes burst with alarming regularity, flooding the secret archives and corridors with sewage. The roof was a patchwork quilt of old roofing, felt that was completely unable to keep out the rain. During heavy spring downpours, the generals had to place plastic buckets right in their offices. The concrete, poured in a hurry in 1941, began to show clear signs of structural fatigue. Moisture seeping through micro cracks in the facade inevitably reached the inner layers. Due to the lack of proper steel reinforcement, cement blocks began to peel away in some places. The building was literally losing its mass, crumbling onto the asphalt as gray toxic dust. The indoor climate became unbearable even for the soldiers, who were accustomed to the hardships of the field. In winter, the cast iron radiators would heat up to the limit, while an icy chill lingered by the drafty windows. In summer, uncontrolled humidity turned the enclosed corridors into subtropical, stifling swamps. The ventilation shafts were encrusted with a thick layer of toxic dust and black mold. The fire safety of the massive complex was at early 20th century levels. There was a complete lack of a unified system for automatic fire suppression and forced smoke extraction. In the event of a major fire, the narrow looping corridors would instantly turn into death traps. Wooden doors and flammable partitions would serve as ideal fuel for a raging inferno. The electrical grid resembled a time bomb with severed wires. The distribution panels were sparking, unable to handle the peak loads from tens of thousands of computers. Engineers honestly admitted that a single serious power surge could cut off power to the entire command center. The control center of a leading nuclear power hung by frayed, melted copper wires. The design of the concrete ramps created for convenience turned into a modern-day safety nightmare. They acted as perfect wind tunnels for the rapid spread of fire and acrid smoke. The limited number of passenger elevators made the rapid evacuation of the wounded physically impossible. The facility was completely ill-equipped to survive a large-scale internal disaster. A congressional commission that inspected the complex delivered a harsh and unequivocal historical verdict. The Pentagon was officially recognized as the most dangerous and outdated government building in the country. Being inside it was a health hazard due to extreme concentrations of asbestos and lead. Immediate radical intervention was required to prevent a complete systemic collapse. Thus began the long preparation for a rescue operation that would transform the very essence of the building. Behind the original limestone facade, a completely new structural framework had to be secretly constructed. Every square meter of this labyrinth had to be surgically gutted without interrupting the headquarters operations for a single second. This monumental operation was given the ambitious codename Project Phoenix. The Pentagon modernization became the most complex renovation project in U.S. construction history. The plan called for the sequential, isolated renovation of each of the 5 giant wedge-shaped sectors. People were temporarily relocated to cramped trailers and rented offices throughout Washington. The work areas were tightly sealed off from the active headquarters by heavy soundproof walls. When engineers first began to tear down the walls of wedge number 1, they were horrified by what they found. Hidden behind the false panels were miles of dead, abandoned wires that had accumulated over decades. All the crumbling asbestos had to be removed by hand in heavy, top-of-the-line chemical protection suits. This was no longer a conventional construction project, but a dangerous archaeological excavation in a toxic environment. The main task was to reinforce that very weak concrete structure from 1941. Engineers tightly wrapped the load-bearing columns in thick carbon fiber fabric impregnated with ultra-strong epoxy resins. This high-tech black bandage tightly bound the old concrete, increasing its strength many times over. Heavy Kevlar mesh was embedded directly into the walls to ensure protection against flying debris. The architects radically changed their approach to glazing the historic exterior facades. The standard, fragile windows were replaced with 5-centimeter thick, multi-layered polycarbonate panels. Each of these windows weighed over a ton and was mounted in heavy-duty, shock-absorbing steel frames. They were specially designed to withstand the shock wave from a nearby explosion of a truck bomb. The building's internal infrastructure was completely destroyed and redesigned from scratch. A single electromagnetic interference-resistant fiber optic cable trunk line was laid within the endless rings. Modern adaptive climate control and smart automated fire suppression systems were installed. The Pentagon finally gained digital nerves and clean, powerful mechanical lungs. At the same time, the deep underground levels and bunkers were being reinforced, hidden from prying eyes. New lines of concrete barriers were poured around the building, cleverly disguised as elements of landscape design. Open parking lots were moved to a safe distance from the outer perimeter, calculated by computers. The complex began to rapidly grow in invisible armor, preparing for possible attacks from the outside. No one knew at the time that this extraordinary strength would be put to the test in actual combat. All the new defense systems had been meticulously designed to repel exclusively ground-based threats. Engineers were preparing for car bombs, chemical attacks, or powerful earthquakes. The sky above the Capitol still seemed to everyone to be an absolutely safe, untouchable space. On the morning of September 11th, workers were calmly putting the finishing touches on the completely renovated section. Just 5 days earlier, the installation of reinforced windows on the outer ring of the facade had been successfully completed. A sturdy Kevlar mesh had been sewn under the drywall, and the columns had been wrapped in black carbon fiber. The modernized wedge stood like an impregnable, high-tech fortress wall, blindly awaiting the blow. The impact of the hijacked Boeing 777 passenger plane occurred at exactly 9:37 a.m. local time. The plane, accelerated to a monstrous speed of over 800 kilometers per hour, crashed directly into the facade. It struck directly into Wing 1, which had just undergone a complete multi-billion-dollar renovation. It was a direct collision of colossal mass, kinetic speed, and carbon fiber reinforced concrete. What happened in the next fraction of a second became a test of extreme physics of destruction. The heavy aircraft pierced the outer wall of Ring E, tore through Rings D and C, and came to a stop in the alley. The full tanks of jet fuel detonated instantly, turning part of the building into a roaring firestorm. Within seconds, the temperature at the epicenter of the explosion exceeded 1,000 degrees Celsius. But the renovated building did not collapse immediately, as would inevitably have happened with the old concrete. High-tech carbon fiber wraps on the columns prevented the heavy floor slabs from collapsing immediately. The Kevlar mesh prevented the stone walls from shattering into deadly shrapnel that would have scattered into neighboring offices. Reinforced polycarbonate windows in adjacent sectors did not shatter, containing the destructive shockwave. This artificially created superstrength gave people the most precious thing of all, time to escape. The vast majority of employees were able to evacuate before the unbearable fire weakened the load-bearing structures. The renovation, which many politicians considered a waste of money, fully justified itself in a single minute. It saved hundreds of lives by containing the monstrous onslaught of the machine's kinetic energy. Only after 35 long minutes did part of the outer ring's floor collapse downward. Even the carbon fiber reinforced concrete could not withstand the heat that had melted the plane's metal fuselage. A huge gaping hole formed, exposing the charred interior of the mangled building to the whole world. The black smoke rising above the Pentagon became a visual symbol of a new, frightening geopolitical reality. The fire raged uncontrollably for several days, spreading through the dry wooden floors of the old roof sections. Fire crews continuously doused the flames with thousands of tons of water, which flooded the underground utility tunnels. The entire complex was on the verge of a complete technical breakdown of its communications and global command systems. But the command center in the deep bunker continued to operate, completely isolated from the chaos outside. The attack on the Pentagon permanently shattered the fundamental American illusion of absolute invulnerability. It became frighteningly clear that the thickness of ground walls no longer guarantees any real security. Even the world's most fortified stronghold is powerless against a massive object falling straight from the sky. The architecture of defense had to change radically, shifting from passive armor to active perimeter control. By September 11, 2002, the outer destroyed wall had been completely rebuilt. A commemorative time capsule and capsules containing the ashes of the fallen employees were laid in its new foundation. The building once again closed its smooth outline, forever hiding its scars beneath a layer of fresh limestone. But inside, it had mutated irrevocably, transforming into a perfect paranoid mechanism. Following the horrific terrorist attacks, the internal modernization program was accelerated and tightened to the limit. What was considered excessive security just yesterday has become the minimum acceptable standard today. The remaining 4 wedges were reconstructed with a frankly maniacal focus on protection against any kind of explosion. The Pentagon began rapidly encasing itself in internal armor, weighing thousands of tons. The entire complex ventilation system was redesigned to protect against chemical and biological weapons. Smart electronic sensors were installed, capable of instantly shutting off the air intake from outside. The building literally learned to hold its breath upon detecting the slightest toxic threat. It became an autonomous, airtight capsule capable of surviving in a poisoned, lifeless environment. Access to the vast complex had turned into a multi-stage, grueling obstacle course. The perimeter had been pushed even further from the walls, surrounded by fences and hidden anti-ram barriers. The subway station located directly beneath the building had been strictly sealed off and rebuilt. A casual passerby could no longer approach the walls closely, as had been the case in the recent past. Security for the facility had shifted from regular police to heavily armed special military units. Combat helicopters and unmanned drones began patrolling the skies above the Pentagon around the clock. Carefully camouflaged sniper positions and automated air defense systems appeared on the roofs of neighboring buildings. The building was bristling with hidden radars and cameras scanning the horizon without a single interruption. The post office was completely moved outside the main complex into a separate secure bunker. Every envelope and package now underwent mandatory intense irradiation to destroy anthrax. Internal logistics within the building slowed significantly due to comprehensive searches and access checks. Absolute paranoia became the primary, unbreakable protocol of daily operations. The physical cost of this radical transformation was enormous, but the psychological cost was even higher. The primal fear of a new attack forever changed the architectural face of American democracy. The former transparency gave way to heavy bulletproof glass and reinforced concrete. Saving the building required turning it into the most fortified prison for its own defenders. The reconstruction was officially and ceremoniously completed in 2011, 2 decades after it began. The building was recognized as the most secure administrative facility on the entire planet, but it was no longer that same cheap, leaky office complex from 1941. It was a highly complex survival machine stretched over an old, mangled historical framework. Look at this austere gray geometry today, from a bird's-eye view. The same perfect Pentagon, the same smooth, calm lines on the banks of the Potomac River. Outwardly, it once again appears to be a monolithic, indestructible symbol of absolute power and control. It seems that the relentless passage of time and devastating crises have left not a single mark on its face. But now you know for certain that this familiar form is merely a dead shell concealing reality. The building, hastily constructed from dirty river sand, has long ceased to be just a building. Every square meter of it is steeped in fear, overloaded with electronics, and tightly bound with carbon fiber. The original, fragile material lies buried deep beneath heavy layers of protection, armor, and paranoia. We have witnessed how a temporary architectural compromise has mutated into a global infrastructure. In saving this concrete symbol from decay and collapse, engineers have created a new, unprecedented fragility. The more complex the security system, the more resources are required to keep it operational. This gigantic organism is forced to consume colossal amounts of energy simply to avoid collapsing. The Pentagon is no longer just a giant office for planning military operations. It is a heavy instrument for maintaining geopolitical power, frozen in stone, Kevlar, and metal. It exists not for the convenience of people, but solely to ensure its own continuous operation. The people inside are merely temporary, replaceable operators servicing this eternal conveyor belt of power. Behind the flawless facade of stability lies the constant internal tension of compressed matter. Old concrete and new steel wage a silent war against gravity, time, and new technologies. The illusion of invulnerability requires round-the-clock maintenance and constant financial injections in the billions. Power has real physical weight, and this weight grows heavier with each passing year. One day, perhaps, this colossal load will once again reach its critical breaking point. The cables will become hopelessly obsolete, and the armor will lose its meaning in the face of new invisible digital threats. But today, this massive blind fortress continues its deaf circular defense. It stands confidently as a monument to an era when security was measured solely by the thickness of the walls. The history of the Pentagon is not a glorious chronicle of triumphant construction or architectural genius. It is a grim tale of how ambition locked itself away forever in a concrete box. How a desperate attempt to hide from danger created the largest military target on Earth. How the preservation of the physical structure forever destroyed its original lightness and utilitarian simplicity. Each new layer of armor made the system increasingly rigid, heavy, and unwieldy. The transformation of a temporary headquarters in a swamp into an eternal citadel came at too high a cost to the system. This price is measured not only in billions of dollars, but also in the complete loss of openness. The former symbol of democracy has finally turned into a closed bunker, cut off from its own people. The next time you see those familiar 5 corners on the screen, take a closer look. Imagine kilometers of hidden cables, Kevlar threads in the walls, and the heavy breathing of powerful turbines. Feel how this concrete leviathan is tense in anticipation of a new, inevitable strike. The true honest story is always hidden deep beneath the smooth surface of the facade. The circle is complete. A building born of fear of world war has become an eternal monument to that fear. The Pentagon survived physically, but it has forever ceased to be merely an architectural structure. Now it is a pure function of violence, forever encapsulated in a perfect geometric form, a mechanism that cannot be stopped, and a heavy fortress that cannot be voluntarily abandoned.